Dr. Sucheta to please take over.
Thank you, sir. It's such a pleasure to make this and an honor, I feel, to introduce sir. Uh, Let me just tell you how I missed joining NTTC Pondicherry when my applications were given. There were 4 applications from the institute that went, and went to Maulana Azad, and 2 went to uh, Jipmer, and that's how I missed NTTC Pondicherry. But nevertheless, I've been a great admirer of Dr. Anantakrishnan and his critique of all the competency based and all the curricula that are there. And let me tell you that his 2 volumes on medical education, when I first started my journey into medical education, I had read them back and forth, and there was a time when I think I used to know them pit pat. So, with that, and with no more ado, let me introduce Sir to all of you. Sir is Professor of Eminence in Surgery and Health Professions Education at the Sri Balaji Vidyapeeth, Pondicherry. He is member of the faculty of the National Teachers Training Center for Health Professionals for 25 years, right from 1981 to 2006. He has been a member of the High Power Committee of Government of India for implementing the recommendations of the National Knowledge Commission on Information Technology in Future Healthcare, a chairman of the Postgraduate Working Committee of the Medical Council of India for revising the pattern of postgraduate medical education in India 2010, and he submitted the detailed version to the MCI on the same issue. And that is the reason why we want to know more from him today. He has been a member of the MCI for drawing up plans for rural posting of medical undergraduates in 2012. Sir has been a trainer for the World Bank assisted project on development of secondary level health services in the states of Karnataka and Andhra Pradesh, a convener for the committee of the Indian Association of Surgical Gastroenterology for preparation of a competency based curriculum for the MCI and the DNB courses in surgical gastroenterology in 1999 and again in 2019. He has been an editor or referee for several international and national journals in the fields of medical education. He introduced the CPGME model within regulatory guidelines at the Sri Balaji Vidyapeeth in 2013 for the first time in India, and so was the convener of the committee for preparation of the CPGME for the MCI and MCH and DNB courses in surgical gastroenterology. I am witness to his excellent book on medical education principles and practice, volumes 1 and 2, and I'm sure all of us medical educationists at some time or the other have referred to these volumes. He has been a medical postgraduate dissertation, a step-by-step approach. He has written that book too, and along with that, a textbook of surgery for undergraduates published by the National Book Trust. Sir has authored over 460 publications, including over 80 publications in medical education. And he is the core faculty of the PGDHP and the fellowship program in HPE of Sri Balaji Vidyapeeth since 2014. Thank you, sir. Thank you for being with us. And we request you to please enlighten us on the competency-based postgraduate medical education program in India, needs, processes, problems, and suggestions and solutions. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Dr. Sucheta. Thank you very much for those kind words. And I'm very, very grateful and humbled and honored by this signal honor bestowed on me for being selected to give the Dita Sood Memorial Oration, the second in the list, and also for being selected for the Lifetime Achievement Award in medical education. Very, very grateful, and I'm moved by this gesture. Now, So my humble obeisance to Professor Rita Sood, whom I've had the privilege of knowing for many, many years now. Our association started in the early 90s when we were both part of the WHO CRO project called Inquiry-Driven Strategies for Improvement of Medical Education in India. 4 institutes were members at that time: the All India Institute, Jaipur, Pondicherry, Institute of Medical Sciences, Varanasi, and CMC Vellore, along with the Department of Medical Education, University of Illinois. And from 4, it gradually doubled to 8, 16, and 32 when institutes like KEM and St. John's and others came in. Avinash also became part of the consortium then. And a notable contribution of the consortium was the preparation of the national consensus document for the MBBS course, which classified for the first time the curriculum into must know and desirable to know and nice to know areas, and outlined the basis of integration. And that was the basis on which the 1997 MBBS curriculum was formulated later on by the Medical Council of India. After that, we got associated in the MCI. When the Board of Governors were in charge, Professor Sareen was the chairman of the Board of Governors. He constituted 2 committees, the Working Group for Postgraduate Education and the Working Group for Undergraduate. Avinash and I were part of the Postgraduate Working Group, of which I was the convener and chairman. And Professor Rita Sood, whose name you see here, was one of the members. And the other members are listed there. And then we had to take Dr. Shama Nagarajan from the World Bank because we were trying to find out mortality and morbidity statistics in India. And the only person who could give it was from the World Bank. And we used to meet every Saturday and Sunday. Avinash will remember, we'll all travel from different parts of the country, work on Saturday and Sunday in the MCI, go back to our respective places and come back next Saturday, Sunday. For a year and a half, this happened. And several dozens of trips later, we prepared a curricular document, which was, meeting was called by the MCI of all the vice chancellors and heads of institutions, where we presented this document. It then went to the Government of India. And then meanwhile, the Board of Governors changed, a new board came, and the priority became different. And the document never saw the light of day. So after waiting for some time, we published that what we discussed in this paper called Is There a Need for Transformational Change to Overcome Current Problems with Postgraduate Medical Education in India, where we outlined our whole gist of our discussion, and all those who were in that committee are authors here. This was published in the National Medical Journal of India. Subsequently, Professor Rita Sood contacted me and said she wants to write on this subject and wanted to know whether I would collaborate with her. I was very happy to do so. And we published this paper on reforming medical curriculum in India in recent years, the whole process from the beginning till the period when we wrote the paper. And it was published in the International Journal of User-Driven Healthcare. It aroused a lot of interest, a lot of feedback. And we wrote a subsequent paper to answer all those questions raised by the readers of the first paper, and this came in a subsequent issue. So that was my contact with Professor Rita Sood over the period of nearly 30 years till she very untimely passed away last year. And again, my respectful obeisance to her memory. What I want to talk to you about today is what we have been talking in several forums for the last so many years, that we cannot really wait for regulators to lead us into this direction, and we have to start working within regulatory guidelines. And we did a small experiment at our university, the Sri Balaji Vidyapeeth, and what I'm presenting today is what our team did there over a period of 8 years from 2013 onwards. We first have to decide, looking at our postgraduate medical education, what exactly is wrong with it and why it requires a change. Some of you might remember this quotation from Bert Lance, who was the finance minister for Jimmy Carter. And he said, don't try to change something which does not require change. So all sorts of questions arose in our mind. Will the students welcome it? Will teachers welcome it? How much will be the increased work expected of them? Will regulatory agencies approve? And then, of course, like every human being, everybody who participates wonders whether their work will get recognized. We started with this thought process, and then we did a detailed analysis in our institute and in some of the other institutes where we had friends of specific issues with the postgraduate medical education in our country. And we find a whole lot of problems which all of us know as teachers of many years, starting with feeling of inadequacy evaluation, which Vivek just talked about. They then do higher specialty, and then they are still not competent, and then they do a fellowship, and then they work somewhere, and this training goes on endlessly forever and ever. The other major problems are that soft skills assessment is not at all emphasized. There's no formative assessment, and there is no promotion of reflective learning, which is considered very important for driving knowledge into deep memory. And of course, we know the problems with our summative evaluation. Over a period of years, it is not only a one-day match, but it is sometimes only a one-case match, where your whole performance, whether you pass or fail, depends on whether you do one case well or not, which is very unfortunate, but that's how the decision is made to certify or not to certify a postgraduate at the end of 3 years. We also have administrative issues like the two systems which govern us with different facilities, faculty numbers, priorities, curriculums, examination systems. And the greatest problem is when somebody fails or a group of people fail or the group of people, all of them pass, you cannot say an institute where everybody passes is good or an institute where 50% fail is bad, because there is no relationship between the summative assessment and the training program. Therefore, we decided in 2013, and I'll mention members of the team at my last slide who made this decision, that we are not going to wait for guidance from the regulatory agency. Those days it was MCI. And we will go ahead and start our postgraduate competency-based program on our own, making sure that it remains within regulatory guidelines. And it also covers all those deficiencies that I talked about in the previous slide. And therefore, the previous one, the 2000 regulations, which was the prior regulation, was an objective-based, content-oriented curriculum. We decided to change it to a well-defined outcome-based model with measurable outcomes. And that was the initial decision we made, that the outcomes must be measurable and must be measured pre-summatively. And it should allow for continuous monitoring, reflective learning, and varying pace for those who are not able to cope. Our overall target being, as far as possible, to ensure competency of all the students before they reach the summative process. And of course, to the MCI does not get annoyed with us. We had an issue of this competency model everywhere else in the world. A competency-based curriculum gives you flexibility of time, that you can extend the time depending on requirements for those who do not keep up with their fellows. But here we had to have a competency-based model where the standards are fixed and the time is also fixed. And that's why we had to work extra hard to ensure that the competency was achieved in the available 3 years of time, because we had no option to extend the course, because that would violate the MCI guidelines. We started by talking to all our postgraduates and to all our faculty to get them on the same page, because they had to be willing collaborators and not compelled to mandatorily participate, because then we knew that the program is certain to fail. So the first phase actually took 2 years, from 2013 to 2015, to prepare the faculty and finish the preparatory phase. And our aims are listed in the slides: a clear definition of outcomes, a well-defined list of skills, aligning teaching learning methods with the outcomes, appropriate methods for ensuring skill acquisition formatively and allowing for a continuous monitoring and feedback, not the logbook, which is static. Having decided that, and after several faculty programs, we started defining what is meant by competency in our Indian context. And that was not very difficult because we had the standard definition of Epstein and Hundert available to us. And that is what is used around the world: the habitual and judicious use of communication, knowledge, technical skills, reasoning, soft skills, and reflection daily practice. So that was easy. And it was also easy to convince the faculty that the competency is not unidomain like the previous curriculum, which had either cognitive or affective or psychomotor. Competencies involve all three domains. There are some which are core to several departments, many others which are subject specific, and there are soft competencies like communication, ethics, and professionalism, again common to all departments, which hitherto were being neglected and therefore had to be specially emphasized in our model. Our model we call COBOLT because COBOLT stands for competency-based learning and training. Once we decided that and we accepted Epstein and Hundert's model, we know that competencies are descriptors of aptitudes and attitudes. They are not descriptors of actions. And therefore, if we have to make them measurable, we had to rewrite those competencies in a format called entrustable professional activity, which has been available to us from 2005-06 from the work of Professor Ole Tenke. But the problem is, although it is available, it has never been usefully employed in our postgraduate curricular process. Once we rewrite this as an entrustable professional activity, we need to ensure these are monitored at regular intervals throughout the 3-year period by defining what are called milestones or levels at different stages of training to ensure the level of entrustment. When they reach the point of entrustment, that means the training is complete and they can be allowed to be released into the society to function as specialists. The faculty were not aware of the attributes of EPA, and therefore several faculty development programs again were convened to ensure that everybody understands how to write an EPA. We had to tell them that there may be areas in the curriculum of your subject where EPA will not cover and you may have to resort to conventional teaching, but that should be minimized to the extent possible. One EPA can cover several competencies and mainly they should be executable independently and they'll be measurable by being observable. And EPA should not be in isolation, but they must form part of the professional activity required not only during training, but after they become specialists. With that in mind, we had to subdivide the domains of EPA into subdomains or subcompetencies. The Indian medical graduate had not been defined those days because that was defined only when the competency-based undergraduate curriculum was released. And therefore, the only model which is available to us at that time was the ACGME model, which divides these sub-competencies into 6, which are listed here: knowledge, patient care, interprofessional and communication skills, professionalism, practice-based learning, and then system-based practice. So we adopted temporarily the ACGME model because there was no concept those days of what an IMG implies. But subsequently, after implementing, I took the trouble of looking at the other models and then comparing that again when our IMG definition became available in 2019. And then you realize that they are not really different, only the nomenclature is different. You take the ACGME, you take the Australian model, you take the CanMed, the European, the IMG, Essentially, it is the same. What is called knowledge and patient care in ACGME, in the IMG, we clump both together and call it a clinician, and in Canada, they call it medical expert. Professionalism is same. Communicator is same. System-based practice. In India, it's called leader and member of the healthcare team. PBLI is called lifelong learner. So essentially same. So redoing it as an IMG format was not considered necessary because we have done essentially the same thing, only the name was different. We had to tell the heads of departments and the faculty of each department how to write an EPA, starting with the title, what is the outcome required, the context, the domains involved, the subdomains, milestones, the suggested workplace-based assessment methods to ensure the EPAs have reached the levels and level at which entrustment can be certified. So having done that, our next stop was to define what is meant by acceptable level of performance or milestones. This concept of milestones has been around for some time, right from the milestone project in the United States. Milestones refer to two things. One is the chronology along the training period at which measurements are made and the level of performance at each one of those stops. And we found the Dreyfus model was the easiest to adopt. The Miller we did not like. Even in the new competency-based curriculum, I don't think the Miller's level assessment serves the purpose for which it is meant. But anyway, that is what has been adopted. So we adopted the Dreyfus model, which runs into 5 steps, starting with a novice who cannot perform the activity, and to an expert who can not only perform independently, but can also teach others. So we decided for our model to adopt the Dreyfus model of skill development. We also decided that we must start the process of reflective learning right at entry. And therefore, the EPA forms, and I'll show you some examples of our EPA forms, are given to each postgraduate on the day of entry. They are asked to study it and then assess themselves on those EPAs. The assessment levels definition of Dreyfus is given, and that is self-assessment. 1 month after they have worked in the department, the faculty assesses them on that EPA and they give their assessment level. And the difference between self-assessment and the faculty assessment according to the level of achievement is the beginning of reflection, because then they start wondering and realizing their deficiencies. That has helped us a lot because we learned a lot by having the self-assessment right at entry by the students themselves. We decided that level of expertise or level 5 of Dreyfus is not achievable in 3 years. It requires, in fact, several years of working in the specialty to be able to teach others in most of the competencies. And therefore, we decided that level 4 would be acceptable for most of the EPAs. Very, very complex EPAs like we have in surgery, the ability to do a resection of pancreas. Certainly, they cannot do it without independently, without supervision at the end of 3 years, and therefore level 3 may be acceptable for very complex EPAs. At that time, when we started, we had 2 systems. We had a degree of 3 years and we had a diploma of 2 years. And therefore, we had to define levels both for the 2-year program and the 3-year program, and I'll show you some examples of those. This is one EPA list prepared by the Department of Otorhinolaryngology. And this is how all our EPAs look like. And all of these, after being prepared by the departments, have been externally validated by calling subject specialists from other institutes to go through them and suggest modifications. This I am showing for the structure, and this is from the Department of ENT. And if you see the serial number on the left side, they have 46 EPAs in otolaryngology, which they think are essential for those doing MS in ENT. And this decision is made by the department. At the beginning, you will have certain EPAs which are common across disciplines because they've also learned skills like history taking, examination during their MBBS course. And therefore, many of these will be found in several departments. The next column in EPA is the competency domain as per the ACGME. And this stands for the 6 sub-competencies: medical knowledge to interprofessional and communication skills. The level of competency desired at entrance, in some like history taking and performing physical, you may say this should be 4 because they have finished their MBBS course. But the history taking in an ENT patient may be slightly different. The history taking in a psychiatry patient will be different from what they practice in the MBBS course, and therefore the department faculty decided it will not be 4, but it will actually be only 2, and they will reach 4 or 5 at the end of 3rd year. And the last column here tells you the people from whom we should take feedback for multi-source feedback. S is supervisor, P are patients and relatives, postgraduates are peers, and I is self. And somewhere where you find H are other healthcare workers. This is from ENT, and this is for the diploma course. You will find that the levels have been reduced to 3 for many of the EPAs, where it was 4 for the degree course. So this is not relevant anymore because all these diploma courses have now been abolished by the Medical Council of India. And this is in psychiatry. Psychiatry decided that they need only 21 EPAs, not 43 like ENT. And their history taking day of residency actually not marked because they said they will not be familiar with history taking and we have to start completely from the beginning. So like this, we prepared for all the 20 broad specialties, including the pre and the paraclinical, but we did not progress to doing it in the higher specialties because we wanted to first try it out. The next step was to ensure soft skills and professionalism. How to do that? Because that was our major problem with the regulatory guidelines till then. If you look at this diagram, you'll see that the postgraduate resident during his residency interacts with several groups of people. But who decides his competency to be released as a specialist are only the examiners, because there is no faculty assessment, informative assessment for the faculty to contribute except those of them who are examiners. There is no opportunity to get a community feedback of their performance or feedback from patients and relatives, nurses, other healthcare workers, and their own near peers and peers to see how they work in a team, which we found is a major deficiency in assessing soft skills. And that is why we decided we must go for 360 degrees evaluation and start multi-source feedback. This was a great challenge to us because of several reasons, which I will mention a little subsequently when we come to that part of the presentation. We decided if multi-source feedbacks have to work, they have to be simple. If you give them a 10-point scale, they will never do it. If you make it difficult for them to understand, they will never do it. Therefore, the first decision we made was we have only 3 points. From their interaction with the postgraduate, do they feel, and this is from relatives and patients, whether the performance of the postgraduate is what they expect from a professional, below par or above par. That is all that is required. And even the 10 aptitudes which they have to measure are easy for them to understand because this is done in the regional language. Are they caring, respectful, no prejudice, and so on and so forth. We thought this form will work and we were surprised it did not work because the hierarchical system in our country is so much that patients are afraid to give feedback because they think that they will get exposed to the resident and the resident will come and shout at them and so on. So it took us months of convincing the patients to ensure that this is confidential. It is not meant to penalize anybody, but only to give feedback to improve. Like this, we have feedback from other peers, and we also have from other health professionals. The next step was to align the teaching learning methods to ensure EPA training. We had to align our THPL methods, and therefore, it had, to a large extent from conventional training, it had to move to workplace-based assessment. We coined a new term called not workplace-based assessment, but workplace-based teaching, learning, and assessment. The emphasis on teaching feedback was as much as in evaluation in every one of our WPBA activities. This responsibility was assigned to mentors and department faculty. Maximum assessment took place in the workplace constantly over a period of 3 years. And every assessment which was recorded in what we call an e-portfolio was the source of feedback, reflection, clearing out doubts, and additional inputs for improving the learning ambience. So you do this all the time and you do it continuously. How will you record it? You can't record it in a logbook because that is static and does not permit continuous recording and feedback. So we had to devise an indigenous portfolio ourselves because the existing portfolios did not fit our requirements. We devised an indigenous portfolio from the Department of Medical Informatics in our institute, which had the facility for all these things. It could record the learning modules, their postings, their rotations, their procedures, which they do assisting or independently, the research, including dissertation, other publications, papers at conferences, other achievements, awards, critical incidents during the training programs, which resulted in feedback being given to them, which may be a complaint or which may be or missing a dose or something like that. Documents substantiating the above, assessments over a period of time, the multi-source feedbacks, and the most important, as far as I am concerned, is the scope for reflection, what they think of their learning ambience, what they think of what they have learned, what is their opinion of why they have learned or why they have not learned, what additional inputs they require to learn better, and so on and so forth. To get everybody in line for portfolio again, took training workshops. The purpose was to monitor coursework to have a continuous formative assessment, not for sending up, but to ensure competency before the summative examination. To assess milestones at each level to see whether they are being met or students are lagging. Those who are lagging require additional inputs, feedbacks, and additional help. It enables mentors to give feedback. It enables planned interventions for those lagging behind, maybe an extra few chances to assist or independently perform under guidance. And most importantly, it's a lasting archive. Nowadays, many of them go here and there, including abroad. 10 years later, they will write back and ask for a certificate. And this EPA is a permanent record. It's sealed when the postgraduate goes, but he can open it for viewing if he wants a certificate after 10 years. And based on that, they will get a performance certificate. So that's how it is useful to them also. And that's why they become willing collaborators. There are many benefits to using portfolios to logbooks. And this we have been trying to tell for many years to the regulatory agencies, but we are not able to get across to them. That's a real-time chronological because the date and time is printed. You know how logbooks are written. They are written the week before submission by the junior batch and signed by the faculty who doesn't have time to go through anything and is submitted to the examiner who has no time to go through what is written there. That is the logbook as it performs at present. Here, the resident takes responsibility for their own learning, tailored to their own needs. There is continuous ongoing assessment, early identification of problems before they become chronic or insoluble, and encourages regular meetings, and therefore the ambience of learning becomes better because there is constant interaction between trainees and trainers. I'll show you two examples of one of our portfolios. This is from the Department of Anesthesiology. The best work in portfolios is being done in the departments of anesthesiology, psychiatry, ENT, surgery. Some of the departments still are lagging behind, and it's been our endeavor to constantly motivate them. This student has written the case which came was one of carcinoma of the ascending colon, anemia, hypoalbuminemia, planned for right hemicolectomy, all the findings, and the pre-operative plan, and then what the concerned candidate did. And on this side, you find the faculty feedback. And the faculty says, Saranya, what is the significance of taking note of albumin in this case? How is it important in your intraoperative and postoperative management? Also, what is the reason for correction of hypoalbuminemia in this particular case? That is the question raised by the faculty when she has seen the portfolio of the student. And then the student takes the trouble of consulting literature and gives the answer, and then the faculty may give more comments, and this continuous learning goes on for some time till a new situation develops. This is one more portfolio, laparoscopic cholecystectomy for open laparoscopic cholecystectomy and open mesh plasty, and talking about intubation difficulty. And the professor of anesthesia says, what was the effect of the repeated intubation attempts on the systolic blood pressure and why it happens? And then how they managed it. And then the student says how they managed. And then if he feels that it has not been managed correctly, he will give additional inputs. And this is what constantly happens in most departments. And I will not mislead you by saying it happens in every instance. It does not happen in every instance, but over a period of time, now that we have implemented it, from 13 we trained, from 15 we completed the job, in 16 we implemented. It's been running now for 5-6 years. And over a period of time, it has become better every year than the previous year. The responsibilities for portfolios are fixed between students and faculty. The faculty role is to define outcomes, carry out regular monitoring, provide additional inputs, coaching and supporting, and deciding whether entrustment level has been reached or not. If not reached, why it has not been reached, and how to ensure that it is reached before the final exam comes. And therefore, since we do it almost every 3 months, this review of portfolios, the feedback is given as and when on a weekly basis. But the review is done once a month, sometimes twice in a month, sometimes 3 times in a month. And when they find that there is lagging behind, entrustment levels are not reaching their peers, then additional inputs are provided. The students collect, present, defend the evidence, reflect and record their achievements, which becomes a lasting archive, and they receive questions, feedback, and respond to it by additional references and increasing their knowledge and applying it. We decided that we needed to do a review after implementation, and 2 years later, the post-implementation review was done to see whether what is happening is really what we intended to happen or it has gone astray. One major thing we found was that the Dreyfus terms of novice, ability to perform under strict supervision, loose supervision, independently, and expert or expertise, to some extent is subjective. And there may be differences of interpretation between one faculty and another, what is meant by loose supervision and strict supervision, or between strict loose supervision and independence if the faculty is available and looking over the shoulder of the student. And therefore, to some extent, objectivity was being lost because these terms decided to be defined much better. And therefore, the second step after review in the year 2018 was to look at these EPAs and to make them more objective. I hope you can see this. We decided that each milestone is not enough if you say level 1, level 2, level 3, level 4 or level 5. You must have a descriptive rubric of that level so that everybody who reads the EPA and has to mark the level will be on the same page. And to see one example, this EPA pertains to acquire knowledge for perioperative fluid management, blood and blood product administration. Level 1, they know about plasma volume expanders, blood and blood products, physiology behind fluid administration. And as they progress from level 1, in addition to level 1, they acquire understanding of maximum allowable blood loss, transfusion trigger, and ability to estimate blood loss. That is additional knowledge required for them to progress from level 1 to level 2. And when they reach level 5, they know recent advances and they can teach others. This is how each rubric has to have each level has to have a descriptive rubric to make all people understand it the same way. And this is from my department. This is about knowledge. One, knowledge of anatomy and of surgical conditions, basic knowledge of normal anatomy of systems relevant to general surgical practice. And when they go to 5, knowledge of various structures in anatomy during complex operations, variations in anatomy, how they affect surgery, how to be prepared for that, how to investigate and find out whether they are there, and what operative step modification is required when you find a variation in anatomy. When they know that, then they become level 5. So every one of all our EPAs and all the broad specialities required the descriptive rubrics to be written to make it objective. But it's not without problems that we had during implementation. We had lots of problems. And the whole idea in my presenting this process to you all is, if some of you want to replicate this, because anybody can replicate, it is nothing against the MCI norms or the NMC norms. You must know the problems, be prepared for them and not give up easily and say, I will not evolve anymore or develop anymore from Neanderthal to Cro-Magnon and human being because there is a block and I'm going back to becoming a monkey. What are the administrative issues? First, to get everybody to agree on a need for change. I cannot deny that some work, additional work is required for faculty, and therefore they must be willing participants. Otherwise, EPAs will not be reviewed regularly, EPA feedbacks will not be given, only signatures will be done. So attitudes must change, and I was telling Avinash about our good old NTTC days, that our emphasis in NTTC over the whole period of 25 years in which period I was a faculty there was not to transfer knowledge, but to create an attitude change towards medical education so that you will be motivated to continue when you go back to your institute, because after all, we were meeting only for 9 days and not a long period of months or weeks. And by and large, I think we succeeded in achieving that. And here also, after several training programs, we have succeeded in creating an attitude change and accepting a little increase in work in the interest of the good of the postgraduates. We also had to have questions from the administrators. What about regulatory norms? Will they get annoyed when they come for inspection? Will they take objection to e-portfolio? Where is the logbook? Our e-portfolio has a section called case log, which is a daily activity of all their activities. And that can be printed out and bound, and that becomes the logbook of the MCI for the examiners. Nobody has refused to see it because it's not in conventional format. The getting universities on board was not a problem because we were deemed to be universities, and therefore we can go ahead because the Vice Chancellor was part of the panel which was interested in and implementing this change. So starting the process, you have to plan, you have to get several FTPs done. You have to talk to the healthcare workers, the nurses and the ward attendants and the OT attendants to tell them, look, you don't have to write your name. You just fill up this form and give it to us. Nobody will know who has written. And then we'll use it only for having a meeting with the postgraduate and pointing out some of the areas where they require improvement without finding fault, without penalizing, or without putting it down on any record. And after we have done that, this will be sealed. It will not be available to anybody else. And over a period of several months, I should say, we get decent feedback from other healthcare workers. We get feedback from patients and the relatives. We don't get that honest feedback from peers because there is a little bit of pollution there. But that is not a very important part of our MSF, and therefore we are happy with whatever we get in that area. We get some feedbacks from undergraduates because these postgraduates are engaging them in clinical classes, and that helps us to give a feedback to individual postgraduates and to group as a whole where improvement is required. Our steps, what we did, are listed here. You have to convince regarding need for change by showing the deficiencies, starting with the deficiencies, and like Bert Lance said, change it because it's broken and requires to be changed. Don't wait for somebody else to come and fix the break. Because after 2000 regulations, you know, the next regulation, when it came only in 2019, I think it was, or 18, the new postgraduate regulations. So it does not happen frequently in the regulatory process. Meanwhile, 18 batches have passed out. You have to bring out advantages of the new system, emphasize on the quality of the output, emphasize on benefits to candidates, reduce undue workload. You don't tell them you have to give feedback every day. A workable solution is maybe weekly or even bi-weekly. And review a workable solution is at least once in 3 months, if not monthly. You have to recognize good departments and recognize them at annual functions, and good faculty feedbacks you have to circulate to others to serve as models and name them so that their rewards, efforts are being recognized, and make it as simple as possible, as I showed, both in our peer feedback and in our investor feedback. We had difficulty in agreeing on a set of EPAs. Different faculty in the departments do not often agree. Then we get external experts to look at this and have. Finally, we have an agreed list. Then it has to be written and reviewed, and it should not be static because knowledge changes. And in another forum, I was telling, I read somewhere, and this shocked me when I read it, that in 1950, the doubling time of medicine was 30 years. So the next doubling would have happened in 1980. Those who passed in 1950 would have finished their service and retired with the same medical knowledge till current. In 1980, it was reduced to 7 years. So as soon as you pass MBBS, the knowledge has changed. In 2010, it was reduced to 3.5 years. So even during the course, already one change has happened. And in 2020, I was shocked to see Denson in his paper said, doubling time of medicine in 2020 is 73 days, every 2.5 months. So once an EPA is written, it should not become permanent, but has to be reviewed to see whether they are still relevant after a few years, and rewrite them if they are not relevant. Then we had disagreements on whether it should be 4 or 3 is enough, or we should aim for 5. Why should they not be expert in history taking and all that? So again, these levels had to be arrived at after discussion and finalized. When to start frequency, we had a lot of discussions. And then we had some sort of consensus. What are the milestones? What are the acceptable levels? History taking, will it be perfect at the end of 1 year so that second and third year we can devote to other things? Such discussions happen all the time, and we have to take consensus decisions. Who should assess, whether only the faculty mentor or the whole department, and how to account for perception difference between student and teacher. That is not a great problem because students understand. If the student says, I am 4, and the faculty says he is 3, it is the duty of the faculty, and then our final EPA form has a place, assessment form, where there are 2 columns, where the student's assessment and the faculty assessment consensus after the discussion. And the agreed level is put, and you have to explain to the student why you are saying he is not level 4, but level 3, in what areas. And then by discussion, usually a consensus is reached. After all, students are also interested in learning. That's why they have come there. We had several problems with MSF. I have already talked about cultural issues of acceptability because of the hierarchy of healthcare, doctor at the top of the pyramid and the others at lower levels. Therefore, willingness to participate, lack of confidentiality, collusion, so on and so forth. And these issues were tackled over a period of time by all these measures: intensive training, acceptable easy form, which I've shown you, ensuring complete anonymous confidentiality, ensuring that feedback is non-destructive and not judgmental, emphasizing only on benefits. E-portfolios to indigenize, we had lots of problems. It's expensive to give inputs in the form of photographs, additional references. It takes a lot of space, storage space, and therefore we had to have a lot of storage space. To some extent, a little addition of fees was there for postgraduates. I think it's 5,000 rupees per year for the e-portfolio space, and so on and so forth. Software expense was not much because it was completely indigenous. Need for indigenization was a problem. Uploading photographs initially because of web space. Now it's not a problem. Maintaining daily log for the MCI. Regularity of entries, need for multiple entries, and so on and so forth. Our challenge still is, in spite of rubrics, there is still an element of subjectivity, very much reduced, but still exists in certain areas. We are constantly striving to make those rubrics better so that objectivity is reached. Faculty mentorship is key, and there was a lot of worry about writing critical events, whether medical legal concerns will be there, complications, and so on and so forth. We don't write issues which are very sensitive, where leakage will be an issue, but other problems where common mistakes are made are certainly entered in the e-portfolio. We then had, after implementation, some problems, and we are coming towards the end of the presentation. We want reflective learning to start, and then you find the postgraduates write no reflection. They just record what they do, and they don't ask questions, and they don't write their impression of the teaching learning process. This again has to be addressed. Even if they write, there is no feedback of the faculty. So this has to be addressed. Very often, incomplete entries, not written continuously, but at intervals, often before we call all of them to have a look. And this, for about 2 years, we were having monthly meetings to see the portfolio of the department to ensure that it's a continuous process. Of course, when we started, we didn't know whether the outcome would be what we show here or what we show on the right here. It was a big risk, and it is thanks to the courage exhibited by the team to go ahead and implement and take a risk and see what happens. We are not bothered about the summative exam. I'm just putting it to show, and I can't even claim that this is because of the competency-based education, but our results were used to be around about 75 to 80%. Now it's about 90% plus in the batches after 2070. The feedback, mentoring, and monitoring as seen in the e-portfolio much better than when it started. Reflective learning as recorded in the portfolio, the response to reflective learning and further reflection much better. The additional inputs and references provided as seen from the portfolios almost reaching desirable levels. Most students, our aim was to see that 100% of students reach the targets before summative, and I can't claim that 100% do, but almost 100% reach the EPA desired levels before summative process. And the perception in PGs and faculty has improved, and now they are actually willing collaborators to the process. We have published our experiences here because we wanted others to try and follow this model or develop models of their own. This was published in the National Medical Journal of India as the cohort model, which can be used as a step to start the competency-based postgraduate education in India because it's within regulatory guidelines. After doing the review of portfolios, we have written our second paper, which is called Competency-Based Postgraduate Training, Mentoring and Monitoring Using Entrustable Professional Activities, with descriptive rubrics for objectivity, a step beyond DEFUS. And that has been accepted again by the National Medical Journal of India, and it will be appearing shortly. This again is for the information and guidance of other educationists to see where problems can arise and how to solve some of those issues. Our efforts in this came to be known in the medical education circles because we have talked about this in various forums. We have talked about it on invitation at Datta Meghe. We have talked about it at KEM. We have talked about it at SRM. And I have gone 2 or 3 times to Kolar to talk to Devarajas University, mainly about e-portfolios and multi-source feedback. We have not monitored them to see what they are doing, but apparently we get a lot of questions from them at various times, which means that the process is not there and some progress is happening there. And as it was mentioned before, we did a complete written curriculum for the MCH course in 1999 in Jitmar when we had the annual conference of the Indian Association of Surgical Gastroenterology. Avinash was one of the members of that panel, which prepared a written document for the first time in a super specialty in India for surgical gastroenterology. And we felt that 20 years had gone, we must have a look at it. And we had at least 3 meetings organized by the Indian Association of Surgical Gastroenterology with leaders in the field from all the training institutes in India, both DNB and MCH. And we have prepared a curricular document based on the EPA model with the levels as per DREFUS with rubrics. And the booklet is now in the line with the Association of Gastroenterology in India. And I requested them to send it to the regulators for their opinions and feedback, and perhaps discussion and acceptance if they find that it is a good model. And I think it is likely to reach there very shortly. And maybe it will help the other super specialties to do likewise. The new MCI PG guidelines have come, and I've gone through it and see the last 2 paragraphs. It still lacks the clear statement of outcomes, and I don't blame the MCI or the NMC because they have to deal with 300-400 institutes having postgraduate programs with different facilities, different faculty numbers, with different resources, and so on and so forth. And they have great difficulty in getting everybody on board. And I know because for 2 years, I told you, we tried to build a consensus and we found it was quite difficult. And it took us about 40-50 meetings over weekends over 1.5-2 years to get a consensus statement. But there are still the new guidelines. There is no clear statement of outcome. There is no clear statement of what is the acceptable level at the pre-summative level. And they are talking about checklists, which again leaves itself open to subjectivity. And again, the new guidelines, to my great regret, has given no clear guidelines on continuous formative assessment, which I think is exceedingly important in the postgraduate course, because you cannot ensure skill acquisition by a single summative examination. It's just not possible. I've written to the NMC and I hope in some meeting it is considered, because now they're all busy with COVID and the examinations. Do not start the Cobalt programs unless and until the student and faculty buy in. Do not start it without administrative support and approval. Insist on regular student-faculty meetings. Insist on reflection, discussion, feedback, and reflection on feedback, and continuous appraisal. If you cannot ensure this, you will not get a product which is satisfactory. And lastly, I must pay tribute to our team at SBV, who have been listed here on the left-hand column, who are responsible for this. Myself, for the initial work, Professor Ravi Shankar, for implementation of Cobalt. He was dean of the MGMC college, where it was implemented along with our sister college called the Sathya Sai Medical College. For being in charge of monitoring and periodic review, Professor Karthikeyan of ENT department, who's in charge of e-portfolio monitoring. He used to call a meeting every month and randomly select photos and make the faculty and the student present for feedback and for corrections, and provide good models for copying. Jagan Mohan, who did the e-portfolio, he was Deputy Director of Medical Informatics, produced a beautiful model of e-portfolio, completely indigenized. And of course, Professor Seduraman, my friend of 40 years in NTTC and outside, he was Vice Chancellor of our university at that time, for his leadership, for his intellectual inputs, for motivation and keeping us going in spite of some depressing impediments in between, and his constant support. And of course, all our faculty and all our residents and all our healthcare workers and other administrators for support, without which it could never have been done. Thank you all very much. And thank you all members of the MEU for a very patient hearing. And I hope I have not left you with this impression shown in the last slide at the end of my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, sir, for this detailed journey of the CPGM PG curriculum, and for delivering the Dr. Rita Sood Memorial Oration. You gave us a textbook implementation of the curriculum, right from the objectives to the teaching learning methods and the assessment, and you did not cringe on the evaluation. And so much like you, sir, you called a spade a spade. And everywhere, wherever you felt that there were lacunae. Yes, sir?
You must call it a shovel sometimes if you want to come. Not just a spade. Spade is a very mild word.
That was so admirable to actually, take onus of what worked and what did not work. Right. And that is where we learned a lot from you, sir. And a brilliant move from MEU India and Dr. Tejinder Singh at the helm, sir. And of course, it's been such a great learning experience for all of us medical educationists. And we hope that we will be able to take this whole baton that you're giving us ahead. Along with that, there are many people mentions in the chat. I'm sure you would love to have a look at them, and all of them are all praise to this curriculum. And I hope that at some time or the other, all of us in each and every medical college will be able to take it forward. So now, with these words, I offer the baton to Dr. Tejinder Singh to confer upon Dr. Nilakanthan Ananthakrishnan, the Dr. Rita Sood Memorial Oration, and the Lifetime Achievement Award.
Can I make one comment, Dr. Sucheta, please? Just one comment?
Yes, sir. Yes, of course.
Just one statement which says the MSF should be in regional language, and it is in regional language. Maybe I didn't tell it out very clearly, but it is for not meant for patients and other healthcare workers, is in the regional language.
Yes. Yeah. And in fact, I answered back to Dr. Kamath saying that, yes, I'm sure it is. Yes. Thank
So
you so much, sir. So
thank
over
you.
to you, Dr. TS.
Thank you, Sucheta. And thank you, Professor Anand Krishnan, for the enlightening talk. I'm sure all of us have gained lots, especially with the competency based education being the flavor of the day. Before I present the certificates to you, can I request Dr. Avinash Supe for the concluding comments?
Oh, sure. Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Tejinder, for this honor. I think it's an honor for me, sir. Sir, I must tell you, this is an extraordinary work because this is not something which is very simple. Because when the world was really struggling around with EPAs and milestones, and I think the concepts were not very getting clear after the ACGME, I think you took a bold step to develop this curriculum and develop the whole concept of milestones and EPA and use the Indian setting to put it into perspective so that it will be something which will take it to the competence. And I think what is important is that every stage you have been critiquing, you have been analyzing, modifying it to suit to our kind of an country. And I think this is a wonderful model you have created. And as you rightly said, you are the only one who has looked it around from 360 degrees. And that is you yourself did a 360 degree critique of this particular curriculum. And I'm sure this is a model we have created. You have cautioned all of us what to really do and what not to do before. And I'm sure in our own curriculums, people will be able to take this one step forward. Even some of the elements also, like e-portfolio, or if anybody is able to really take it forward, and some departments take it forward, I'm sure it is going to be enhancement of their curriculum and competence. So I think from all of us, sir, I think here we cannot give you standing ovation, but I'm sure I'm asking everyone to give a standing ovation. And hats off to you, sir. Thank you so much. Thank you. Go back to Tejinder.
Thank you, Dr. Avinash. And it's my pleasure to present the Dr. Rita Sood Memorial Oration Award to Professor Anand Krishnan, and I request that please accept it on our behalf. It's also my pleasure to present the Lifetime Achievement Award to Professor Anand Krishnan on behalf of MEU India Group. And once again, thank you very much for all your kind help and consideration.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much. And thank you, everyone, each and everyone, for a patient hearing. It's been a great privilege to recall my association with Professor Rita Sood, and with many of you whom we have met in various forums in the last decades. And I am humbled by your recognition, and I'm extraordinarily, immensely grateful, sir, for this honor bestowed on me. Thank you very much.
So thank you, everyone, for being with us. And we'll shortly announce about our next session, which will be held on 12th of March. So see you again on 12th of March. So good night.
Night. Stay safe.